Welcome to Mindfulness Manufacturing. My name is Trevor Blondeel. Spending 25 years in manufacturing, I discovered the real impact we have on turnover, communication, and the ability to manage change is how we show up. That's the essence of emotional intelligence. In each episode, we bring a guest or message to expand your skills, engage your people, and grow your organization. So let's jump in. In manufacturing, we tend to want what we want. We want to figure out our end result. Maybe it's a change we want on the line. Maybe it's an adjustment to a production system. So we talk about that. And if we don't get what we want, sometimes we talk more. Like if I say it again, maybe everyone will do what I want. But sometimes saying less, you get more. And I have a friend, Fotini Iconomopoulos, who is a master communicator and negotiator. And she's from Toronto and grew up in Niagara Falls, just around the corner of Stratfordville. Welcome, Fotini.
Thank you so much for having me.
So always fun to banter with a fellow Canadian. And, we met through the speaker group, and your negotiation is what you speak on. Mm-hmm. And I read your book, and it's like, wow, the manufacturing experience that you have, maybe not so much on the shop floor, but just in the industry is amazing. And so what started this whole, and what a great title, because if you can read the title and do something with it, it's a great book. So I know Trevor needs to say less and get more. And how did you get into this whole space, and in particular, so much business and manufacturing?
Well, I mean, I grew up in a small family business in the tourist industry. So I was always in retail for a really long time, dealing with manufacturers who were supplying us. And I grew up in the small business side of it, knowing I wanted to go corporate. I wanted to not be a small business owner. I wanted to have a steady job. I wanted a paycheck. So when I did my MBA, I left my MBA because I was recruited by L'Oreal. So L'Oreal recruited me and immediately put me in a job that had me negotiating with Walmart on a regular basis. So I'd be going into the Walmart office as one of the youngest people sitting in the waiting room and negotiating with their buyers. And I did that for a number of years. And I was eventually poached by a food company to do the same thing because they were trying to find an in-house Walmart team versus they were farming it out before. And then a training company was brought in to train us to be more effective at those negotiations with those Walmart buyers. And they said, you should really be doing what we do. And I was like, yeah, sure, someday when I have more experience. But they're like, no, seriously, you should be doing what we do. And because my background was in this manufacturing world and the supplier world, and I'd done so much with the retailers, it was a natural fit for me to sort of become their CPG specialist. And so when I started working for that organization and I started literally traveling all over the world doing workshops for everybody, my favorites were my roots were the ones where I was working with suppliers and retailers, and I trained both sides of the table. And then eventually the suppliers ended up going, it's great that you trained our team, but we have 100 million on the line, or we have $1 billion on the line. What do we do? What do we say in these scenarios? And so I started working on the real life scenarios, going back to my roots, but on the consulting side of things. And so it just was so fun for me to just zone in on the negotiation piece of the business cycle and not having to do all of the detailed stuff. I get to walk away and go, okay, you guys handle all the details, and I'll be back, check on you, ask if you have any questions.
Yeah, you get them to where they want to be. And I think that's why it's important for the listeners today in hearing you, Fotini, because that is the what I've learned just since getting to know you, right? Like we were in Orlando, and I had the Renaissance, the fancy hotel, which was all sold out, and I couldn't get a room. So I'm dragging luggage around. And then your Instagram, right? You just happen to be talking about hotels and just how to, approach people, your words, your approach. And I go to meet Jordan, and she's like, hey, yeah, you can leave your luggage over here. Is there a chance that there would be a room? This is after we built a little bit of rapport, and she plays on her computer and then hands me a card and says, we have one room open for you. You can go take your luggage there right now. Yeah, I was able to credit that to my following of Fotini. And it's the micro moments, right? Do you find that this whole say less and get more in this practice that you teach, is it like going to the gym? Like you just want to be mindful in a lot of your conversations, and it's just a practice and a skill? When have you seen people get better at this?
People ask me constantly, when am I going to get as good at this as you are? I did an event for a bunch of students last weekend, and they asked that exact question again. And the reality is, I practice it 365 days a week, talk
Mhm.
about it for the most part, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And so I'm always in the zone. I'm always thinking about it. And the more I can help bring people awareness to the fact that you are negotiating all the time. When you walk up to the hotel check-in desk, that's a negotiation for your quality of life, for your reduced stress levels. All of those things are negotiations for time management, for energy management, for respect, for airtime, for all of those things. So the more you build that awareness, it's almost like you're stepping in the gym without even having to drive to the gym. It does create, you need to get the reps in. You need to have the awareness that you're getting the reps in. And then you can be more intentional about it. So it's one thing to be somebody who's moving all around every day in their home and so on. You're always active, you're not sitting. It's another thing to say, okay, I'm going to be active and lift these weights right now and
Mhm.
start to change my body composition. So it's one thing to be talking to people all day. And it's another thing to recognize this moment is a moment where I have an opportunity to make things better for one of us or maybe even both of us. And the more aware you become of that, you're logging it. And now you're creating best practices that your brain wants to repeat over and over again.
Interesting. This is why I connect with you so well, Fotini, because I'm writing my book, and the core message is around deep results come from deeper conversations, not telling people what to do. And I once got feedback on a survey when I was running a plant that Trevor needs to understand that Rome was not built in a day. And I think in that moment, and I didn't know better, I was telling people what to do a lot. And what really resonates when I study your material is, like you said, being aware, and then it's not about negotiating to get your way with your words. Can you talk more about, like, for us to change, it doesn't happen when people tell us like, hey, you should give me this price or you should change this tool out, but we got to change the thinking of the other person. And to do that, we got to be aware and we got to be curious. And so that seems to be parallel with negotiating as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's some really interesting statistics about how people make decisions. I read a lot more books and studies now on psychology than I do about traditional negotiation stuff. When we look at how people make decisions, one of the reasons why I have job security is because AI still hasn't figured out people's emotions. And
Ooh.
people don't make decisions solely based on logic. If we did, computers could take over the world. But because we
Mm-hmm.
don't make decisions that way, because there's so much emotion attached to every decision we make, because you're aware of the fact that you could be poking the bear, that you could be pissing somebody off, that you could be getting them to like you. The fact that this could go so differently from one person to the next tells us that there's a lot of emotions involved. And so, one of the questions we have to ask in any interaction is, how am I making the other person feel?
Yes.
If they're feeling like they're being, finger wagged at or being told or not being acknowledged in the conversation, then they're going to have a lot of resistance, a lot of defensiveness. But if you ask questions, if you get curious about them, if you demonstrate that you are listening to them, they're going to feel a different way. They're going to feel like, oh, he's actually paying attention to what I
Mm-hmm.
have to say. Oh, my ideas are actually being factored into whatever is going to come out of his or her mouth. Those are the types of things that make people want to engage, versus it's very easy for all of us, whether it's with kids, with dogs, with other people around us and so on, to go, okay, here's the right thing to do, now do it. But no one wants to do things that way.
No.
So we have to find other ways to engage. Tamsin Webster does a lot of really formulating that type of stuff in her books as well. She talks about people go with what they believe, not facts necessarily. So you have to get in line with what are their beliefs. And the moment you can understand those beliefs, you can build on that and get them to do what you need them to do.
Yeah. What do you believe about this? Like, saying less, we do want to talk, but we want to ask more questions, right? Because those questions unite us, and then it helps us understand what is that person thinking. So then you can understand to say, okay, so if it's, whether we do X number of changeovers this week on the line, the production, we don't want to do any changeovers. Materials, we want to keep the inventory low because we get measured by carrying costs and turnover of our material. And it's just kind of like understanding each other's perspectives. And I like the fact too that you referenced never splitting the difference. And it's really not about splitting and compromising. It's more than that.
Never splitting the difference is a tactic that's used really often in negotiation. It's not necessarily one that is useful for both parties. So like if I'm negotiating with a toddler and they want the black shoes and I want them to wear the white shoes, splitting the difference would mean, okay, you wear one white one and one black one. That doesn't make sense.
No.
So it doesn't always make sense to do stuff
Yeah.
that way. But I mean, there's other reasons why splitting the difference should be a red flag for a lot of people too, because usually it means somebody has opened more extreme and there's some manipulative tactics behind it and so on and so forth. Oftentimes there's a solution that's going to actually work better for everybody, but you've got to get curious. You've got to learn about one another. You've got to understand what's going on beneath the surface in order to be able to uncover some of those things.
There is emotion. And then when you start taking that emotion, you're curious about someone else, it almost diffuses that emotion inside of you, right?
Yeah.
That may be driving the conversation the wrong way. So if we can shift our focus on others and just be curious about them, asking more questions, and then they feel connected. And it's like, okay. And then they start thinking differently. Right?
I mean, yesterday I was having conversations with folks about imposter syndrome, and people kept asking, how do you get over imposter syndrome? Well, imposter syndrome is just getting stuck inside your own head. It's getting, tangled up in your insecurities and so on. If you can get curious about the person sitting across the table from you, it gets you out of your head and now gives your brain a better place to use all of that energy. In fact, I mean, I used the example yesterday with someone where I said, if someone's being a bully to me, if someone's being a jerk to me, my instinct now, I've trained myself this way, is to go, I wonder who hurt you. I wonder where this comes from, instead of, oh my God, what did I do? So instead of freaking out and training myself into fight or flight mode, I'm training myself into a more productive mode to get curious about the other person, to start coming up with potential solutions around this. What is the origin of where this is coming from? How can I ask a question to get us out of this scenario? And maybe there's a solution that we can uncover. But if I'm so caught up in my own insecurities inside my own head, I don't have any of the mental capacity left to do the productive work.
That's so good. And I can't now not, when I think about you, I think about like sometimes someone riding an elephant. Explain to listeners that one, because that ties right into what we're talking about.
Oh, it's been a while since I've read that one. This came from, I wish I could remember who I sourced it in the book, but this comes from another book. I think it was something having to do with the name Happiness. I wish I could remember.
Put it in the show notes.
Yeah, but the analogy is it's having an elephant and a rider. And again, this comes down to the logic and our emotions. The logic is the rider on top of the elephant, but the elephant is the emotions. And so the elephant is strong. If your logic is really good, you can guide the elephant where you need it to go. But if those emotions take over, then you're going to be plowing through whatever, it's bull in a china shop type of reactions there. So we need to be really careful to keep that balance and keep that rider in check to help guide those emotions versus letting the emotions take over. Yeah.
Manufacturing is very emotional. Like, it's stressful. When you're inside the four walls, the line's down, emotions are running high, and there's elephants trampling all over the plant. And we don't even realize it, right? So with these techniques, it helps us settle that down. My favorite quote was, anxiety drains, confidence gains.
I forgot I even said that.
Isn't it cool when someone reads your book and it makes me think, oh, I get a chance to ask Fotini about this? Because it's true. Like, when we're not emotional, when we're in sync with our elephant, and we're riding together, we're more confident, right? Because it's kind of, okay, I'm not freaking out here. And let's just look at what's going on. What's driving the behavior? And like I said, even with the bully, like I wonder what happened to make you respond like that. What do I need to understand so we can work through this problem?
I mean, it really is about it's not becoming emotionless. It's not about being stoic, because most people make that overcorrection where they're like, I need to take all emotions out of it. People say not to show your cards. And I'm like, well, that's going a little too far. It's about being in charge of your emotions rather than letting them be in charge of you. So there's another really great book called The Upside of Stress, where Dr. Kelly McGonigal talks about the stress in your body. You're going to have the same stress response in terms of the increased heart rate and maybe the shallow breathing and that kind of stuff, whether you're excited or scared of something. When you can take the mental capacity to go, instead of I'm anxious about this, and say I'm excited about this, instead of I'm fearful of how many things could go wrong, it's saying I'm excited to finally fix these problems that are going to be coming up. I'm excited to use my problem solving skills. I'm excited to show them what I'm made of. Those things, even though your body is still having, the adrenaline pumping and all that kind of stuff, your brain is processing it differently. And your brain is going to be far more productive when you can use that excitement instead of that leading with that fear. And so, how do we channel our emotions and get in charge of them in such a way that we're going to make our brains more productive? And on top of that, it's the energy that you're going to be putting out that make people want to engage with you. So
Yes.
if that increased heart rate for me makes you sense that I'm nervous and uncomfortable, you're probably not going to go along with the solutions that
Yeah.
I'm bringing to the table. But if that same energy is making me come across as passionate and excited, you're going to be like, I want to get on that train. And so, how
Hmm.
can you channel your emotions in a way that are going to be productive instead of counterproductive?
Yeah. Like, hey, I'm really excited to figure out, what we're gonna do on this line. And, instead of just anxious of like, hey, I gotta, so I've been in these situations where you've got like a maintenance leader and a production leader.
Mm-hmm.
And they're at it, right? Because the line's running, there's some quality issues, the whip needs to be replaced, but we got to hit the target. And I was thinking, if I was the maintenance person, I could say, if you can give me 10 minutes on this line, I can give you 4 hours of throughput where you won't have to worry about those weld. So I took that from your framework,
I
Fotini.
love that. I love that. That's conditional trading. It's taking care of your needs first,
Yeah.
but making it seem like they're getting a reward at the end of it. And they are. They're
Yeah.
getting some mental de stressing, they're getting something that they were after. It's just understanding that this is cooperative language. This isn't, you must do this. Or yeah, I'll do that, give you that 4 hours, but only if you do this for me. Well, now feels like a punishment instead of a reward. So again, it's getting into their brain in a way that their emotions are going to feel more positive about it versus negative about it.
Yeah. All you put in there was a great framework, and we'll leave this in the show notes, is if you, then I.
The four magic words of negotiation.
Yeah, and I didn't really, how many times I've been on the side of the line trying to get people aligned on a changeover or a downtime. And man, if I would have had those 4 words, because instead it's like, hey, listen, Fotini, you need to shut down this line for 10 minutes because I need to replace this whip. Do you understand me? And then how does that go?
I can imagine how people would respond to that.
So yeah, just this whole framework. I appreciate how you say and how it is with the energy that we bring to it. So different manufacturing references, and I never realized this was a manufacturing because I've been in manufacturing all my life, but EOD, end of day,
Mm-hmm.
like got to get it to me by the end of the day. It's like, okay, so that's not all the time everywhere, because as soon as I read that, I'm like, oh, I resonate with that. But you saw that trend specifically in manufacturing.
I did. It was a tradition that came up in the Walmart universe. So they had what they used to call the sundown rule. And the origins of that down in Arkansas when the Waltons were running the business was, I believe it was Sam Walton. I might get this wrong, but this is the legend that I've been told, is that it was a courtesy thing. It was, hey, in order to
Mm.
be respectful of your peers, you should respond to them with by sundown. And so it was
Mm.
almost taken and weaponized in the culture when I started joining that Walmart universe, where it was, you have to get back to me. We have a sundown rule here. And I was like, well,
Woo.
that's your rule, not mine. But the whole purpose of it was actually quite cooperative. Instead of being consumed by it or victimized by the sundown rule, it was, okay, how can I make someone feel acknowledged? I'm not going to have a solution for them by sundown, but I can at least make them feel acknowledged to go, hey,
Mm.
that in itself will take people's energy down a level, their anxiety down a level, to at least make them feel like they've been heard and they've been acknowledged. Because most of the time, people use artificial deadlines on a regular basis. It's another tactic that's used constantly in negotiation. But it's the element of how can you change that tactic and turn it into something that's going to make you in charge of it instead of being charged.
I was a materials manager for a lot of years, and there was a tactic which I didn't like, and it was like, okay, tell the supplier that we only have 5 pallets left. And I'm like, well, we got 15. Yeah, but we got to put the pressure on them to make sure they deliver. So reading your book now, I don't think that was the best tactic.
I'm not going to judge whether it was good or bad, but I understand where it comes from
Yeah.
because that's the principle of opening extreme.
Okay.
And so we open, it's almost a negotiation in terms of how many pallets are we going to decide where this gets down to. If I open exactly where I expect to finish, people are still going to push me and I've got no room left to give them any satisfaction. So
So
I'm
good.
not a huge fan of lying. I don't
Yeah.
advocate for lying, but what you could say is we're running so low on pallets. it's getting dangerously thin here. What can we do to make sure that we don't run out?
Mm,
Or we're down to our last few pallets. Few could be 2, few could be 15. I prefer not to lie about in negotiations. I'd never advocate for that in any of the teachings that I
mm.
do. So what are the workarounds to increase that pressure without having to go as far as something that is crossing ethical boundaries?
Yeah, the resistance point, is that what you talk about a little bit?
Yeah, and so people, it's finding out what is that point where things are going to fall apart, and so people try to open outside of that resistance point. So for example, if the resistance point in this scenario is if we get down to 5 pallets, we're going to have to derail the whole system. And so if I don't want to get to that point, then I'm going to open outside of that in order to leave myself enough wiggle room so I never have to actually come to those bare bones moments. And so people will open extreme in order to avoid that. In this circumstance, where we're not necessarily negotiating, well, how many pallets are we going to exchange? That's not the actual
No.
scenario. So the resistance point doesn't necessarily apply, but you need to create some boundaries. I just don't think you need to lie about boundaries. And so, how can you go, look, when we run low on this, here are the consequences for you. The consequences are the line's going to be down for a while. The consequences are it's going to take a while to start back up. The consequences are we won't be able to serve you next time if we find these things are happening over and over again. We're going to have to prioritize other customers. And I would hate to see that for you. When you can help them understand what's in it for them, or why they should want to be motivated to do it. But people are actually more motivated by what they stand to lose versus what they stand to gain. So too often we try to dangle these bonuses in front of people. If you can get this done, I can get you even better turnover and whatever. And they're like, yeah, but if I'm satisfied with where I am today, I don't want to put any extra effort in. It's actually not as motivating as, look, every day you're not doing this, you're losing this much capacity. Now they're like, wait, it was in the palm of my hand and I'm losing it. It's exactly the same proposal. I'm just reframing it in a way that their brain is engaging. It's getting their emotions involved in a way that's going to actually serve both of us.
I don't want to do the silly dance. I've done enough silly dancing. So that's good to hear. Like you said, you're doing this all the time. Like this is in your thoughts. And for manufacturing, it's not. This is just a gift for our listeners to kind of hear, hey, let's zoom out for a second. What have you seen through manufacturing colleagues? If you said there was one common challenge that they have in their own behaviors in this type of negotiation, what's the most common one you see?
People will talk themselves out of a deal all the time. They don't know how to say less. They just don't know how to shut up and they get in their own way.
Were you watching me?
You are not alone. It's such it's outside of manufacturing as well, but I do see it as a big prevalent one in this world.
I learned that really quick because I cross that US-Canada Ambassador Bridge quite often. And if there's any place you got to say less to get more, it's the border control.
Yeah, that is for sure, especially these days.
But when I think about it, if you're silent and you don't say anything, I'm going to start talking more and convince you of why we need to do this changeover, or why we need to buy this capital equipment. Then you just got to keep talking and not knowing what you're doing here.
And you might think that you're convincing, but the reality is the more you say, the more you give away.
Ooh.
And knowledge is power, right? So if you don't stop to take in the information and you're constantly giving out information, people just get on these roles where they lose self-control, and there's no delete button. There's no back button when you're saying things out loud. And so we need to learn how to pause, how to take a breath, how to understand, are they listening right now? Like, I've been involved in meetings before where I was with colleagues before I was self-employed, and people were doing pitches, and they're talking so much that when the person sitting across wants to say something, when you see them lean forward or open their mouths, but the person who's talking just keeps going and steamrolls over them, in that moment, you're actually losing trust from the person sitting across from you because you're not giving them any airtime. You're not making them feel like they're part of the conversation. You're going into that wagging finger tell mode. When you're taking over all of that airspace, there's not any room for the other person, and it doesn't feel an exchange anymore. Well, now it feels like you're trying to steamroll me, and that doesn't feel very good. So what are my feelings going to be towards your proposal when you finally come out and tell me what it is that you want from me?
So when you lean forward, I shouldn't say, "Hey, just let me finish." That's probably so. I can write the book on what not to do, and you can read Fotini's book on what you should do. But
Well, I mean, there's a time and place for that too, because sometimes
yeah.
people can just not stop talking and you've got a limited window of time to
Ooh,
get things
yeah.
done.
Yeah.
But what if you were to say, I'd love to hear what you have to say as soon as I'm finished telling you this? I think I could anticipate some of your questions. So
Mm,
again, it's just framing it in a positive, cooperative way that makes people go, okay, let me like move my shoulders down a little bit now. I'm a little less defensive. I'm more open to what you have to tell me versus if I'm tense and I'm feeling defensive because you're not letting me get a word in edgewise, how can you make me feel more at ease and more likely to want to listen to you?
Fotini, you've just made the mindfulness manufacturing community smarter. And usually my last question would be, what do you want to leave the listeners with? But this last couple of minutes, man, I just got to think about it a little bit in my own practice and my own days and how I show up. Your book is on the website. We got a book report on it. You can read my summary, and I suggest you get it. Instagram, I know you're good to follow on because I've done that. How else should the listeners connect with you?
I'm a big user of LinkedIn. That's a great way to do it. My website, fotiniicon.com, has some resources there. There's more that are going to be loaded very soon as well. But yeah, the socials are where you can find me.
Thank you, my friend. Appreciate you coming on the show.
A pleasure as always.
Hey, folks, appreciate you taking the time to join us today. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone. Haven't subscribed yet? Do it now. Remember, if you want results, the key is increasing your awareness of how you show up.